And we're recording.
Cool, and we're on. Hi.
Hi.
I know your face. I think I know your face. I think I do, yeah. Let's one it, right?
Hey.
No? Cool. Where are the nerds? Why is the empty seats up front? I know, it's like only 5 nerds in the class. I thought I was coming to the world of nerds. No nerds here. Cool. So my name is Thulani Madinginye, and the reason I know Letshwanelo's face is because she did SAWIT. And we had a bit of an exchange over email at some point in our lives, whether she remembers it or not. I am I suppose, a trained economist in theory. I say in theory because I don't really practice as an economist anyway. I studied in UCT. That's how I know Sumaya and Caesar, and that's probably how I ended up standing in front of you guys. I did a Bachelor of Business Science in economics, and after that I did a Master's in Applied Economics, both of them at UCT. And I wrote my honors dissertation was on the triangular relationship between poverty, inequality, and growth. And then my master's dissertation was on nationalization as an economic tool. And I think the results will surprise you. But that's kind of my background academically in terms of where I fit into the economic story. I lectured in UCT for a year. I worked as a consultant for a couple of years. And I continue to lecture in different places for various organizations. But what I do primarily is run my own investment holding and research firm called Baraka, which is the thing that you see there. It's called Baraka Value Investments, and we do economic and investment research, and we do actual investment. So we are a whole investment holding firm, and the aim is to become the biggest investment holding firm around the world in about 2 years. Okay, maybe 10. But that's the plan. That's what we're aiming at. And so research and academic interaction is a big part of what we do because we like to make our investments based on rigorous research and rigorous outcomes. So we don't just kind of go for whim. So I'll take you through. That might be the wrong PowerPoint presentation. Sorry. So I've got 2 PowerPoint presentations. One is macro, one is micro, and that's because tomorrow we'll be going through macroeconomics together, whereas today is supposed to be micro. Okay, here's to hoping it's the right one. Okay. Cool. So I'll take you through the macroeconomics fit. So I want you to know that I can spend on paper at least an hour's lecture on almost each of the big concepts that are going to come up today. So I'm going to try and hit the surface, but hit it hard enough that you get an idea of what's below the surface. Okay. So and I checked out some of your profiles as well. I gather you don't have too much economics background. So I might not be able to do a proper deep dive. And feel free to ask questions while we're going through it. yeah, just put your hand up, tell me what your name is, and I'll decide whether you can ask your question or not. Okay, depending on whether I like your name or not. So Thulani is not allowed to ask questions today. I'm kidding. So just put your hand up and we'll ask. You can ask whatever questions you want, and we'll rather go through that because then you get it. I think you'll probably find that you're asking questions that people are thinking about anyway. Okay, cool. So why did I become an economist? Because economists do it with models. That's what they told me first. So if you don't get now, I'm hoping that at the end of tomorrow you'll get that joke. Okay. But basically, the idea is to communicate the rigor that's supposed to underpin economic theory and research. It's not always the case. I find that my fellow economists make statements that are kind of drawn from the air often. But that's the point. The idea is to try and follow the numbers. That's what economics is about ultimately. But we all have ideological backgrounds that bias us towards one way or another. Okay, so that's the reason I became an economist. So what the hell is economics? As a basic starting point, economics is the social study, which hurts me every time because I also thought it was just a science, not a social science, that examines how people choose to use limited or scarce resources in attempting to satisfy their unlimited wants and needs. Okay, so essentially economics is about maximizing, maximization. How do we use scarce resources to ensure that we meet as many of the needs and wants that we have as a humanity and as people? That's what economics is supposed to be about, and everything else feeds into that story. Okay, so you'll find different ideas, different theories, blah blah. All of it is supposed to try and fit into that. So what are scarce resources? What do we mean by scarce resources when we refer to this? Because it's quite central to the definition of what economics is. Scarcity basically means that people want more than is available, right? So the easiest example to go with is that there's only one you and only one me, and you can only be at one place at one time. I mean, at any one time. Okay, so you could either be here at this economics lecture slide presentation, or you could be at a job somewhere, earning an income. Okay, so what ultimately happens there is that you end up having to choose, right? Because there's only one you, and there are multiple places that you could be. You end up having to choose one of those places to be at those places. So scarcity forces us to make choices, and because we have to make choices, there are always opportunity costs. Okay, so what is an opportunity cost? The opportunity cost of doing one thing is the next best thing that you could be doing. Okay, so I don't know what you could be doing right now, but based on my weekend, I could be sleeping and getting a bit more rest. But my calculation was that it would be better to be here. Okay, and just to tell you up front, the reason I thought it would be better to be here is because I'm hoping you guys are going to do a lot of talking back. Okay, because I want to get a sense of how people understand economics as well. Okay, so those are the three kind of underpinning ideas behind what economics is about. Okay, it's scarcity, it's choice, it's opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is a trade-off. It's essentially what a trade-off would be. It's equivalent to a trade-off, but it's not exactly the same. But yeah, it's a good way of understanding it. So that's economics. Okay. Within economics, we've got microeconomics, which is what we'll cover today, and we've got macroeconomics. Okay, this is in red because that's what we're going to talk about today, and then tomorrow we'll talk about macroeconomics. So what's microeconomics? Okay, microeconomics is the study of individuals, households, and firms' behavior in decision making and allocating resources. Okay, so once we know that economics is about trying to understand how people use limited resources to meet unlimited needs and wants, what we want to understand is how people, homes, and companies make decisions in allocating those resources in order to develop the goods and services that they have to then serve to people. Does that make sense? Yes. So that's microeconomics, and you'll see in a moment the definition of macroeconomics, which we'll do again. I'm going to go through these first 3 slides again tomorrow, and see what the difference is between the two. Okay. So, how do they go about making their resource allocation decisions? Okay. So, as a result, microeconomics deals with the choices that people make. Okay. What do you generally choose? Do you choose to go to economics lectures, or do you choose to sleep? Okay. The factors that influence those choices. Okay. So, how tired am I versus how much value do I think I'll derive from this interaction, as an example. And how their decisions affect the goods markets by affecting the price, supply, and demand. Okay. So, my decision to sleep would have meant that there's one less lecture available in the market, for example. Does that make sense? But my decision to come here means there's one additional lecture available in the market. Okay, cool. Is that everyone comfortable with that so far? Yes. Okay, so the stuff we're going to deal with today is, whether it feels or looks like it or not, actually related to this. Okay. So macroeconomics is a contrast to microeconomics. Macroeconomics is the branch of economics that studies the behavior and performance of an economy as a whole. Okay. So now we've got and you can see that, right? Micro level detail. We want to know how the macro level stuff operates given the micro level decisions. Yeah? So once we've made our decisions, how does that impact our economic growth, our GDP, our capital base, all of that stuff? Yeah? So if you all choose not to get an education, how does that impact how the South African economy operates? Okay, once we've dealt with your individual decisions. So it focuses on aggregate changes in the economy. Okay, so how does a more educated base, is that a question?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask that when we do speak of micro and macroeconomics, so
yeah.
For economists,
Mm-hmm.
does that include the black market and that economy as well, that is not taxed, does that include that, the money that leaves the country, and that basically cannot be
accounted for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that include?
So the tricky thing with economics is that you have many blind spots, right? And that's one of them. And it's a blind spot not because we don't know about it, because you can't track it. Okay, so because we'll follow numbers, what we'll tend to do is give our best guesstimate, and you'll find that term is a very popular term in economics. Okay,
so then doesn't that mean that, okay, never mind.
No, it's cool. So you would have seen in the last 3 years, the Nigerian economy magically became bigger than the South African economy. Okay, that's because we finally got a grasp on how to better guesstimate what the actual size of the Nigerian economy looks like, because it's got so much informal black market operations happening there. So you're almost always trying to get better at getting a grasp of what the numbers actually look like, and that's why there's so little privacy in the world today, right? It's because it better informs our economic calculations. So we can tell from your bank account exactly how much you bring in and how much you spend. And if we could do that for everybody in the country and everybody in the world, we won't need to guess what the GDP size is. We'll have a clear, accurate number.
So which means that the current numbers are actually inaccurate?
Not inaccurate. So what we'll tend to do, sorry?
No, I was just saying they approximate.
Yeah, they approximate. That's very good word. Yeah, that's very good. So they're not inaccurate, they just approximate what the right number is. Very good. I'm gonna use that word all day. It's mine. Okay, cool. So that you try and find a way of figuring out. So there are a couple of things in the world, right? There are known knowns. Okay, so the things I know. Okay, so that was a deliberate repetition of those words. Okay, they're the things I know that I know. Okay, so I am a black male. I know that I know that. Okay, there are things I know that I don't know. Okay, so I know that I don't know robotics. Okay, and then there are unknown unknowns. Okay, so there are things I don't know that I don't know, like I don't know what I don't know. So economics generally tries to incorporate the known knowns and the known unknowns and come up with a number. And the black market falls into this known unknown, right? So we know that we don't have a number for the black market activity, So we'll try and figure out what we think it's going to be, and try and incorporate it. But we can't account for things that we don't know. We don't know. That's just unfortunate but true. Cool. So if we're in there and we're saying that economics is about trying to meet wants and needs, what are wants and needs, and how do we differentiate between the wants, the needs, and actual demand? Okay, and this is going to lead us into the beginning of our conversation around some components of microeconomics. I always have to think about that for whatever reason. Okay, the wants are basically the things that individuals have, like biological, spiritual, material, cultural, social, however else you want to call it. So you can clump everything in there. So I want to be a rich, well-traveled, well-fed, healthy, fit person. Okay, those are all wants that belong to me alone. Okay, and all of that includes in there flights, cars, gym, Fabiani suits, whatever, cars, Ferraris, BMWs, Apple iPhones, good bed, good running shoes, all of those things. So in those six spaces, I can encompass all those wants. Okay, it also brings in it basically covers a lot of things, right? So, but do I have the resources to meet all of those wants? That's a different story. And groups also have collective wants, right? So we all want there to be law and order in the country. We want an education system. We want firefighters. We want police. We want an army. We want all these things that make us feel better as a group and feel like we can operate within something that protects us and yet gives us the room and space to be individuals. Okay? All of those things are basically the different wants that we have as people. Does that make sense? Cool. Needs, those are the things we can't live without, right? So food, water, air, clean air, and I emphasize clean because China's got air but it's not clean. Shelter, clothing, okay? And clothing, you can see falls into those two, right? Because there's Fabiani and there's I'm wearing clothes. So you need to not be naked, but you don't need to be wearing a 12,000 rand suit. Okay, so and you'll find that needs do that. So you need to eat, but you don't have to have sushi for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Okay, I'd never do that anyway, but you don't. Okay, you can just have bread, and water. Water is water, right? And shelter. You need a house over your roof over your head. You don't need to live in Houghton. Okay, but it's nice if you can. You know what I mean? So there's that. We live in a world where the basic needs need to be covered, but the roof, the ceiling on how far we can take it needs to stay open in a sense, right? So you don't want anybody to be too poor, but you don't want people to feel like they can't be as rich as they want to be. Make sense? So those are wants and needs, and how we translate that into demand is that demand for any one good or service only exists when those who want something are actually able and willing to purchase that thing. So I want a Ferrari, but I don't count in the demand. I don't want a Ferrari anymore. I wanted a Ferrari, but I didn't count in the demand for Ferrari because even though I would have been willing to buy it, I didn't have the money to buy it, so I wasn't able to buy it. Okay, but I count in the demand for, So I count in the demand for Apple iPhones because when I wanted one, I was willing and able to buy it. Make sense? Until that, you're just kind of part of the wants and needs, but you don't form part of the demand. So until you can actually buy it and actually want to buy it, you don't form part of demand. Does that make sense? Cool. Are we doing okay as far as simple? Okay, good. If I'm going too slowly or too simply, let me know. If I'm going too crazy, let me know. In terms of too hard. Okay, so those are the things we want and need and how they become demand, okay? But in order for us to meet those wants and needs, we need to be able to produce those wants and needs. Okay, so, and what we use to produce those wants and needs is use our factors of production. Okay, when I actually started studying, which was not that long ago, funny, the textbooks only gave you 3 factors of production. Okay, it was natural resources, human resources, and man-made resources. Okay, that being capital. And more, the conversation has come around entrepreneurship being a factor of production, right? And that's because the entrepreneur plays the role of bringing those natural resources and converting them into the needs and wants that people want, and meeting the demand for those things. Okay, but natural resources, and this is important, right? So natural resources in economics textbook you'll find is just called land, okay? And it confuses the living daylights out of first years because you're like, what? Because they say minerals are land, and you're like, whoa. Start twitching, okay? But natural resources encompasses it, right? So you've got everything that hasn't been built on is generally falls under natural resource, okay? And that's a factor of production. So water, land, minerals, the things underground, the things that grow on the ground, so trees, so anything that mankind hasn't touched falls under land, okay, as natural resource. Human resources, that's just people, right? The ability to work, and sometimes you can like bring technology into that. So if you're able to make one person do the work of 2 people because you added technology into that, it can fall under that. Is that a question? No. And then entrepreneurship, again, the thing that connects everything and changes into goods and services, okay? And then man-made resources, and it used to say capital, and that used to confuse us all again because capital always equated to money. In economics, capital is not money. Capital is all the man-made machinery and the things that aid us in transforming natural resources into goods and services. Okay, so when you build a road, it forms part of capital. Okay, when you take a machine that's a sewing machine and make it turn cloth into clothing, that's part of capital. Does that make sense? Okay, so everything that's been made by human beings in order to aid the production process forms part of capital. Okay, so the returns to those things, land gets rent, again a general broad story, okay, and then labor gets wages and salaries, and entrepreneurship gets profits, and capital gets interest. Okay, so when I put down capital, I'll get interest. If I put down my entrepreneurship skills, I should get profits. When I put down my labor, and the subtle difference between entrepreneurship and labor is that labor is employed by an entrepreneur, right? You get that. And then when we deal with natural resources, I get rent from that. Everyone's still comfortable? Yeah. You got like a scowl. I'm not sure if you're unhappy or if you're confused. Yeah. You're good. You're like, what is this guy saying?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, things like buildings would fall under man-made and
Yeah,
not
it's capital. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So they would have come part of
Yeah.
Something like Uber just messes up this whole.
The what?
Something like Uber or like the kind of crowd sharing type.
No, not entirely. So Uber is entrepreneurship, right? So you've got someone who's decided to disrupt the industry insanely, like just because.
So you don't need all of them, you just need one, is what you're saying.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need all of them
Okay.
at all. Yeah, you can take one and get a return on that. So most people just have labor. Funny enough, whether they think they do or not, that's all they have to offer the world. and they get paid salaries, and they use those salaries to acquire their needs and wants. But most people are just laborers, and no shame in that. I'm just saying that's just the way it works. Yeah, we good? Types of goods. Sorry for the terrible errors. So now we know how to produce things. What types of things can be produced? Okay, so you've got private goods, and private goods are things that I can consume and exclude all of you from consuming. Okay, so water. I drink, my thirst disappears. All of your thirst remains in place. Okay. And you can do that with clothing, you can do that with sushi, you can do that with a BMW, you can do that with a bicycle, you can do that with jewelry, Okay, so there are some public benefits to my consumption of it, i.e. I wear my clothes and you don't have to see my fat, and you don't have to throw up. So there's a public benefit to that, but essentially it's my private consumption of those clothes. Okay. Does that make sense? Versus public goods, whose consumption cannot be cannot exclude others. So once you've put a road down, good luck stopping people walking on that road or driving on that road. Yeah. Ethos is an attempt at privatizing the consumption of roads for sure. Yeah. Not privatizing so much as helping people pay for it. Helping the government pay for it. We can have that discussion someday. But stuff like that. So if there's an army in the country, there's an army. Like if there's a war, that army will fight the war. Whether you paid for the army, didn't pay for the army is going to protect you. Okay. And education is a weird public benefit as well to it, right? So because you're educated. So let's take the Uber guy, maybe not educated, let's leave, because he might not be educated, I don't know what it's like. But let's take the Uber guy, right? So he's set up a private company, whose public benefit has become cheaper taxi prices for people almost across the world. Okay, so there's a public benefit there that you didn't need to do. But that doesn't make it a public good, right? Because cheaper cab prices don't mean anything for me who doesn't use the cab. Okay, but things like roads, clinics, better health. So if we kill smallpox in the world, there's a public benefit there that's obvious. Now I'm not at risk of getting smallpox. Does that make sense? Do you see? So it's this idea of excludability and non-excludability. Okay. And then economic goods and free goods. So economic goods are things that that have an exchange value, right? So you can put a price to it. Okay. So the pen you write with is worth no more than 10 Rand, I hope. But there's a price that you can attach to that particular good. Okay. Lecturing services, depending on who your client is, you can put a price to it. Okay. And then free goods that you can't quite put a price to it, and therefore can't exchange. And it's just stuff that you. Like a simple example is oxygen, right? Like how do you price that? Even if you could trade it, what do you know? So, and often what you'll find is that the goods that are almost free goods tend to be public goods. I'm not saying they always are, but they tend to be public goods. It's something you can't stop people from consuming, and as a result, you can't quite get them to pay for it. Yeah? And then you've got homogeneous and heterogeneous, whatever that word, goods. Okay. What she said. Homogeneous are goods that are the same, and the other word are things that are different. Okay, so in the phone market, you've got iPhones, you've got Samsungs, you've got, you used to have Nokias.
Still do.
Still do. Sorry, I didn't mean to hurt anyone's feelings. And right. So it's the same product, but it's got like differences that add or reduce value. Okay, so those who use iPhones are generally better off. Cool.
So is it partly the nature of the good and partly a philosophical argument? Because the road you can't stop people from walking, or the army example, that's just the nature of the good. But then something like water, there's been attempts by companies to privatize and charge for that. So, and that's a philosophical argument of like, we need to charge for water. So how do you define, like you would think that's a free good, no exchange value, but has turned into the economic good with exchange. So like, is
So it's
does that
interesting.
become because of like a philosophical?
So it's interesting because water in a river
Yeah.
should be a public good that sits there and
Right.
does its thing. But water that goes through a pipe
Right.
and opens into a tap in your household has a cost attached to it that you can very easily put a value onto. And therefore that can be priced and
So
but
it's basically the nature of the good and,
Yeah.
and how you're accessing it.
it's a combination of things, yeah. So it's about one, it's can you actually charge people for it?
Yeah.
So how do they actually come up with prices for water? Right? Is it actually about the cost of putting it out there? It's not, right? There's more than that to it. It's also about getting some profit.
Yeah.
Roads and e-tolls, right? So if you're, for all intents and purposes, how are they coming up to the decision that it should be 1 rand per kilometer or 40 cents per kilometer? Is it about the maintenance cost of the road? Is it about the loans that were taken to build the road plus the maintenance? How are we coming up to that price? So what you'll find is that even in that, more often than not, and the tendency with public goods is that they'll charge you for, well, they should charge you for the cost of putting it down and maintaining it. But you'll find that the benefit of that particular good is much more than the cost of putting it down. So you end up paying for, what is wrong with the chairs? Sorry, you're not the first one to trip. Is there something wrong?
No, it's just the stable's on a screw that sometimes.
Oh, I see, okay. Because you also had a, oh, it was, I was going to leave it if it was just you because I thought, anyways. So the cost tends to be a lot cheaper than the actual benefit that you derive from the good. Whereas with private goods, the price generally reflects your benefit.
Right. Yeah.
You enjoy, I mean, someone's drinking the berry blaze juice back there, as an example. How you enjoy it will generally be reflected in your price. Yeah. Cool. So that's where we are. Yeah.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm being too philosophical about it, but about scarcity and human beings having unlimited wants and needs, and hence this perception of scarcity. Human beings themselves are limited in that you're going to die at some point.
Yeah.
So how much can you consume? So the foundation of economics on the perception of scarcity just doesn't sit well with me. I don't think there's a scarcity.
Why?
That's the
why
premise
not?
of everything.
I mean, the question is there unlimited amounts of water in the world?
There's enough for the people that are on the planet.
No, that's not what I asked you.
It's limited. I don't think
Okay.
it's scarce. Am I thinking too much about it? There's a finite amount.
That's what scarcity is. It's the fact that it's finite.
Okay, but there's a finite number of humans in the world. So why this
Absolutely.
perception of limitedness? Of less, of more.
I feel like you're answering your own question, but I'm not sure if I'm hearing you differently to how I should be hearing you.
Putting it out.
No, I hear you. I just let me hear other people and then we'll discuss it. Yeah, go for it. Is it on the same point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like water, like land, you can't grow the number of land, and you can't like literally increase the amount of water, especially when you consider like environmental issues. But humans, for example, I mean,
We just keep producing
yeah,
millions,
we
yeah.
keep producing. So
But people
was the
keep
aim of
dying
this.
as well. You understand?
Yeah,
the
but
regulatory
if you look at the historic trajectory, for example, the population has been increasing.
Yeah,
But we
it's-
have better sophisticated methods of replenishing the land
That's
and
it.
working and yielding more food, more water at a specific time.
So why is there
So
scarcity?
raining, yes, exactly, that's my point.
Yeah, so-
Everything is regulated.
So there's technological improvements that make us able to produce more,
Yes.
but we're not going to increase the amount of land we have, for
But
example.
you yield better fruit, more fruit, or greater production on the land with sophisticated technology.
I agree, but it doesn't change the fact that the amount of land is fixed and
Okay.
shrinking, in fact. Some would
So
argue.
we're going to have double the population on the earth at some point. Is that my point is that the relationship between the goods and the human beings, or the consumers and the services and products. I'm saying that on both sides they regulate.
No, I think you're missing the function of it. I'll take your hand now. You're missing. So the function of economics is exactly right. Exactly that. Yeah. We know that we've got limited amount of land.
Right.
So some entrepreneur must use that limited amount of land to find a way to meet all the needs that must be met by that piece of land. So technological improvements to make land yield more food than it was yielding 50 years ago is a function of the economics. It's that someone found it worthwhile to go and genetically modify seeds so that they yield more corn, so that there can be more corn to feed the world. That's economics at play. That's exactly it. If it wasn't, no one would have gone and genetically modified things to make them yield more, or found fertilizers, or any of that stuff, or developed machinery to make sure that we need less people to work the land and still produce the same amount of food. That's economics at play. That's exactly it. And it's all underpinned by the fact that land is scarce.
So when I first came across like the economic problem, right?
Yeah.
There's unlimited demand, but there's limited resources.
Yeah.
I had the same question, and I think it's also because of our upbringing, where we're told like you should control your wants. Right? So you shouldn't have, like, why do we have or why do we assume unlimited wants when what we should be doing is trying to encourage people to, live simply and not want so many things. So I think that it is, so there are people within city planning is my background. We work on demand management. Right?
Yeah.
So you encourage people to not want a car because if everybody drives a car, we can't sustain it.
Yeah.
So the demand side management, I think, is an aspect of economics.
Sure. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but I think so. The fundamental economic problem exists to an extent, but I think you can temper the unlimited demands. In my understanding,
Sure.
but I think classical economics will say no, there are unlimited demand. There is.
No. I mean, I don't think the solving of the problem means that the problem didn't exist. Do you see what I'm saying? So just because we find a way to make the land do what we want from it, doesn't mean that the land suddenly grew. It didn't. It still remains what it was. That's what I'm saying. It's economics at play. So there is a component of it of demand management. So bring in cow trains so that people don't drive to work. Okay, that's one way. They do that with water as well. So close your taps. Don't let them leak. Electricity. Don't leave your lights on. That's demand management. I.e., try and just be prudent with how you manage the stuff. But even in managing your demand, there's still a minimum level of everything that you're gonna need, right? So need again, whatever. But there's still a minimum level of consumption that's going to be in place. And how do we meet that minimum level of consumption? And it's a to and fro question. But I think the fundamental story is in place. Like, people want things. We don't have enough we don't have enough resources to meet those things, and so we have to do with the resources that we have over and above its natural state some stuff in order to make sure that we meet that minimum demand. There was a hand somewhere.
Just with what Sophia was saying on scarcity, because with economics, right?
Yeah.
It has an agenda.
Economics has an agenda.
Yeah, right. At least if you're not looking at the black market, right? So it's looking at.
I'm confused. Sorry. Just what do you mean by an agenda?
Okay, I'm explaining.
Okay.
So it regulates everything that is taxed or registered consumer goods and products, right?
Let me just say this for you before you continue. So economics at its rawest, in its most purest, as sort of an M&M song, sorry, would not have tax, funny enough.
Would not have tax.
Yeah.
Oh no, okay, fine, but it does. Or at least we're looking at.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So there's a difference between economics as an agenda to the people who are using economics as an agenda.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Maybe not saying the broad study, right? But what we're speaking about in particular or at least, okay, fine, so let's identify two different markets under which different economies operate.
Okay.
Economy being a broad term that can, refer to different markets, I understand that.
Okay.
So there's the free, whatever, the open market that's taxed, that's regulated by state rules that we can watch, that we can account. And then there's that which we cannot, right? And then, yes, and then we speak about economy on a broader scale.
So you're saying that's the black market?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that we cannot account for. We don't know what flows where, right?
Okay.
And then there's the concept of scarcity.
Yeah.
Right? That overrides economics in general. And what I'm saying is that the economy, the one that is used by state or the one that sort of perpetuates consumerism, and the one whose answer to everything is to sort of bring everyone into that market, or perpetuating sort of consumerism, or making more, right? Modifying foods or whatever to reach a demand or supply.
Okay, hold on. I think that you are having an ideological struggle. I don't think you're having an economic struggle.
Okay.
Okay, but I just because I'm hearing. So, for example, you're repeating consumerism a lot. Okay, and it sounds to me like there's something else outside of economics happening there. So basic economics is, and you can argue and say, no, people don't have needs and wants. But I think that's untrue. Okay, so the basic story is you have needs and wants.
That's not what I'm saying.
No. I'm saying, so there's a difference between consumerism, i.e. I'm just having more than I should, and there's what I need and want. I need to eat, I need to drink, I need to have clothes, I need to have shelter. I'm saying even if we're operating in that space, where we're not overeating or over anything, none of us are in any way consuming more than we should, there would still be basic needs and wants. Yeah, and I'm saying, so if when you think about economics at its basic level, that's where you want to think about it. So how do we meet those basic needs and wants with the resources that we have? So black markets, regulated markets, however the hell those happens, and black markets tend to be worse than viewed markets, right? Because prices will be higher, there'll be more scarcity in black markets. It's almost always better for something to be seen. A simple example is 1920s, 1930s America and alcohol, right? The reason bootlegging happened and Capone became rich and famous and a thug is because there was a black market for alcohol, so the prices could spike. The moment they legalized alcohol, prices came down, people could enjoy more alcohol, whatever the story is. I'm saying...
We've also heard stories of the opposite happening as well.
Like?
But where once things are regulated, the prices go up instead of... but it's fine. I think it's early in the presentation.
Yeah, it's a creation of monopolies that does that.
I wanted to ask a particular question.
Okay.
You took it and you sort of told it before I didn't even.
Okay, ask the question. I apologize.
I feel like, no, it's okay.
Ask the question.
I feel like it's early in the presentation and that we should continue.
Ask the question.
And then we should go. No, I'm serious.
You don't want to ask the question?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Does that cover your basic story? Yeah. What's happening?
The screen moved, hasn't it?
I have no idea.
Oh, the cat.
Okay. Is that better? Okay. The central economic question. So there are three main questions in any economy that you're trying to answer, right? What to produce, how to produce it, and for whom to produce. Yeah.
So I think what we're starting with is the idea that economics comes from the assumption that there's scarcity in a certain environment.
Yeah.
So if you deal with it from the perspective that it goes to a certain environment, but not in general, basically that there is scarcity depending on how people use the resources within that particular environment, rather than
that there's scarcity, period.
Yeah, rather than the issue of scarcity in itself, is to say that the people in this environment utilize this and this and that, and therefore the scarcity, because what may cause scarcity as well is the fact that maybe the resources are not monopolized by certain individuals within the same environment. So they may say it's a scarcity, but the people who have the means to get those to afford those items
Yeah.
actually are consuming more than the people who can't.
Okay, there's a hand there. Let me take that. Again, I think there's ideological stuff happening, and I'm maybe miscommunicating, and I'm not talking properly. But I'll
I think also the issue here might be how there's a consumer eating in the Western world, how we believe that the free market capitalist system is the most preferred answer to
Okay.
the question of scarcity, how we kind of default towards the scarcity, and this is how we answer it too.
Okay.
And I think that
there's a holding back on that. Yeah. Okay. So there is an ideological story, in a sense.
Can I also ask you to allow us to engage with the content ideologically as well?
No, go for it. I just
Sort of like saying,
no.
okay.
You can. I just want you to know that you're doing that.
No,
That's
we
what I'm
do
saying.
not. We do not.
Okay. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want?
No, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it was just a thing.
Okay.
Going forward, because we are going to engage with the structure ideologically. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me put my ideological leanings bare in front of you.
Okay.
Okay. So we do that because my intention here was not at all to play any ideological card. I think that there is no such thing as a free market anywhere in the world. Okay, I don't think any such thing exists. Okay, and the example that gets put forward, actually, it might exist in West Africa. Okay, so the Ghana food market, for example, might be the closest thing to a free market that I've seen. Funny enough. Okay, why? Because there are numerous suppliers, countless. Okay, people supplying food on the streets of Ghana, and numerous buyers. Okay, me, you, everybody lives in Ghana, and I can literally right there negotiate my price down, because if this guy says this is, why have I just forgotten the currency of Ghana? CD. This is 20 CD. I can be like, that's madness. Mpo, John, Kwame, whoever's next to him. Kwame, this guy says $20. I don't think that makes sense. Can I make it 15 CD? And literally get that. That's probably the closest thing I've seen in my life to a free economy. Okay, the American economy, which gets touted as a free market, is probably the most regulated economy in the world. Okay, if not close to one of the most regulated economies in the world. Cool. Now, the question around, is the free market king versus do we need regulation? I think for me is a senseless question. I think that you need to do both. Okay, and you need to, depending on where your economy is, be closer to one side than to another. Okay, so I think that, for example, in your early development, you probably need more regulation and more protection of your industries, but as they get more competitive and stronger and can compete with everybody globally, you can loosen that because they can now just go win by themselves. Okay, but if you're still nursing young industries, you protect them. So, and then there's a question around the use of monopolies versus the use of competitive spaces. If you were to make our electricity supply system a competitive system, prices might actually just stay high, because the supply of electricity requires economies of scale. Okay, so the bigger your operation, the cheaper it is for you to produce and sell electricity. Okay, so you literally, I'll take your hand now. So you literally find that depending on the industry you're in, depending on the economy you're in, depending on whatever it is, you need to do more or less of the other. Okay, so that's where I am ideologically. I think that one just needs to think creatively about what they're trying to achieve and what the best way of achieving it is. I don't care if that's letting people sell as. So I think malls are the worst thing that's ever happened to South Africa, for example, because it's like an entrenchment of monopolies. So you go to every mall you go to, you'll see the same damn shops all the time. Okay, so and it makes it hard for a guy who wants to start a new retail business to come in, because Pick n Pay just says, if you bring that guy in, we're not in your mall. And the mall owner's like, hey, dude, like if Pick n Pay is not coming in, I won't get foot traffic, I won't make profit. Okay, the South African economy is structured in most industries in an oligopoly structure. Okay, which in some industries serves the country, in other industries is bad for the country. And we need to think about which ones need to be broken up and which ones don't. So that's where I am ideologically, just to be on the table. So
And I just want to comment on what Mohammed was saying. What I understood you saying in the global perspective, I think they said 20% of their African
Wealth.
nations are currently enjoying 8% of
Yeah.
of production.
yeah.
Production. So does their issue of scarcity become relative, or will there is it just constant economic problem regardless of who's consuming how much? You know.
Is that what you're asking? Because I was going to say how I understood you to be.
But America right now is consuming
So I just
more
want to
than
close this door.
all of Africa combined. So this is it's more scarce for others than others. So
Is that what you're saying?
scarcity
Yeah,
is still
and just to say, I just want to know if economics from its own self as a subject is just, regardless of what those issues are, it comes from a scarcity perspective. This is why they start, this is what it's built upon, basically, that we assume scarcity. And then we do a balance between supply and demand.
So the base, I mean,
The basis of
that's what I started with. The base of
Yeah.
economics is the scarce resources.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I think we can then accept it moving forward if that's the basis we want.
That is absolutely the starting point of economics.
But we
And-
do have
and-
our issues.
And you guys are contending whether there are scarce resources.
Yeah, so I
Okay.
think that's what
Yeah.
we're saying.
And I have an answer that I think is true, and you have an answer that you think is true. And I don't know if we ever arrive at the same place.
Yeah, from what you
Yeah.
giving to us as economics, I think we'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm giving you what is economics.
It comes from the
Yeah,
basis of
that's right.
Yes, that's it.
scarcity.
Okay.
How do you answer scarcity when you have a situation where we're looking at elasticity of supply and demand, and the economy is actually in equilibrium? How do you question scarcity because their demand and supply is actually equal?
Okay, you've taken us a couple of steps forward, and we'll get there. But how do you answer the question of scarcity? So remember what I said to you was that demand is not the same as the wants and needs. Okay, demand is the number of people who can and are willing to buy something. Okay, so that separates us. Okay, so it separates us from wants and needs to demand. Okay, and so when we say we've reached equilibrium, we're saying all the people who want and are able to buy can buy. There's someone who's going to supply that demand. So it's a different level. Does that make sense?
Okay, maybe I'll understand better if we move into that section.
How do these work? I'm saying so. It's almost like a funnel. Okay, so you've got something like this. Okay, so up here we've got wants, which just never end. Okay, and how many of you in here don't have a phone? Who doesn't have a phone in here? How many people are in the room?
29.
Let's round it up to 30. Okay, so in a sense, we've got an infinite want in this room in terms of phones. Okay, if we take 30 to be the number for infinity in the room. Okay, so we've got that. Okay, how many of us? And then you've got needs. Okay, what's the actual needs we're trying to meet with phones? Communication. Okay, does it have to be done with the phone? No, it doesn't. Okay, and we're calling communication a need, and it's maybe a need, maybe it's not a need. Okay, but for the sake of the illustration, we'll say that. Okay, it's a need. Okay. Okay, so how do we take? Wow, that's amazing. How do we take these, okay, and bring it down to demand? Okay, so we'll say at the bottom of this funnel is where we filter it into demand. Okay, how do we take that into demand? It's you making the noise. Okay, the way we begin to aggregate it into demand is that we ask the question, how much is an iPhone? Okay, say 12,000 rand. Okay, iPhone 6, whatever, plus. Okay, so 12,000 rand. Okay, how many of you in the room have 12,000 rand right now? On your person or in your account? How many? Have you got 12,000 rand? Okay, so the demand for iPhones is 0. Do you get that? Okay.
So basically, demand means those who have the money must be supplied.
Those who have the willingness and the means.
But so those who want it and have the money.
And have the means. So if it's if it's sold, okay, let's just please try and engage with the economics for now, and then we'll deal with that. I promise you, I've got lots of ideological stuff that we'll discuss later. Let's just deal with the economics for now.
No.
Okay. Yeah, just the basics.
Maybe is it right as a basic premise again to assume that economics operates within a liberal ideology?
What's liberal? You're gonna get stuck here.
What's the difference with the
And this is why I'm asking, alright?
But sorry, before I take it, are you covered with the difference between needs, wants, and demand? Okay, I'll deal with it. Okay, cool. Sorry, yeah, go on.
The reason I'm asking is, it seems very idealistic, and beyond that, I'm not sure of certain economics ideas operating in other systems, like either than political systems, other than the liberal framework. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
So the funny thing is, the economics I'm showing you now is actually conservative right-wing economics.
Yes.
This is conservative right-wing economics. It's not liberal economics at all. But there was, I know you had a question. I thought there was a hand before you. No? Oh, you good? There we go. Are you good? You covered? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask about the example that you made when you're talking about the whole thing of monopolizing versus privatization. There's sometimes when you...
It's not normally versus, but okay.
Yeah, like you said, usually it's better to first monopolize because like the prices like...
Come down. Sometimes it's better to have monopoly.
I just want to ask for your personal opinion when it comes to ESCOM monopolizing the production of electricity. Do you think it is a good thing?
So my political leanings around ESCOM influence what I think about ESCOM, right? So I think that as a country, we should keep ESCOM public, owned by the government, because it allows us to, if Botswana ever decides that they want to attack us, just switch off their electricity, for example. We can say that, please come, but you'll have no electricity. Okay? That's one reason. And I'm giving Botswana as an example for fun.
But in terms of price, do you think...
Yeah, so, yeah, and that's the next level I want to go to. And then the next level for me is that ESCOM allows us to move, for example, from 5% electrification in 94 to 95% electrification in 2015, 2016, and do it at a price that people can afford. So people in Soweto can afford. If you were to bring a private operator into that, they'll just jack up the prices, and those people are not going to be able to afford it. They already think it's expensive now, and South Africa is in the top 10 lowest electricity prices in the world. So that's what I'm saying. I have political leanings that influence what I think about ESCOM, but can it operate more efficiently? Probably, and I think that's what we should work on. I don't think we should privatize it though.
But considering the fact that maybe 30% of the electricity that is actually sold by ESCOM is already bought by ESCOM from other private companies, because like according to the rules and legislation, you're not supposed to, if you are a private company, you're not allowed to sell directly to the consumers. You have to sell to ESCOM. So if I am to sell to ESCOM for like maybe let's say 2 rand per megawatt, I can sell to the consumer for the same price.
But they won't. They just won't.
If they are to privatize, can I ask a question because I don't know much about this?
They're regulated right now. That's why they have to sell ESCOM at that price.
Why do they have to sell it to external investors? Why can't it just be South Africans only? Or Africans then?
So Russians tried to do that, right?
Oh, okay.
They sold their public companies to Russians.
To only Russians.
And then what happened is that a few Russians bought all of those things, and they created the billionaire Russians that we know today, and the rest of the country wasn't. So
Because I'm just talking about the price escalation, you know, because wouldn't
Yeah.
it be then, it might not happen to that extent, whereas if someone else came through from another country to buy, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so the point I'm
If-
making
yeah.
with Russia is that the exact opposite happened. It
Oh.
ended up being a few guys who make up the oligarch and they sold at high prices.
So,
So
if you look
human
at
greed, whether you're South African or not South African, is
Yeah.
human greed.
Yeah.
And you ultimately go the route of trying to make more money for yourself.
so would it even be possible to sell it maybe to other African countries? I don't know. I'm just
It is, I'm saying, I just think that will arrive at the same problem. I think that the government should just hold ESCOM.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, that's an ideological leaning.
So why? What's wrong with that?
I'm trying to teach the basic economics.
That's still an idea. This is also ideological.
No, I don't want to have an ideological discussion
No,
yet.
even conservative right-wing economics is also ideological.
Okay, let's move on. So what's demand? And we've kind of made the illustration, right? My. So this was worth my time. So demand are the quantities that the potential buyers are willing and able to buy in a certain period. Okay, so it's the 12,000 question. Okay, if I asked you though, do you have 500 rand to buy, I don't know, what brand of phone goes for 500 rand? Alcatel. Okay, how many of you have 500 rand on your person or in your bank account right now? Come on, stop lying. Stop lying. What?
everyone.
Okay, I thought you were saying no one. Okay, so the demand for Alcatel is 30 in the room. Okay, versus the need for phones, which is almost infinite by this room standard. The need for communicate, or the want of phones, the need for communication, and the actual demand for the devices that help you do that.
But doesn't demand get quantified by willing as well? Because if we are able, are
Yeah.
we willing?
Absolutely. So that would be my next one, right? So
Okay.
you've got 500 bucks. The next question is, how many of you actually willing to buy an Alcatel? Okay.
No one.
Yeah. You don't want it. Okay. And then you also need to distinguish between individual and market demand. Okay. So if this classroom makes up the market, I would take each of your individual demand for particular. So if I said to you, I'm selling this Koki, whatever the heck it is, Mr. Sketch washable markers, okay, for 2 rand, okay, we determine how many of you have 2 rands, whatever it is, and then we determine how many of you are willing to buy this thing, and then we ask how many would you buy at 2 rand at an individual level, okay? And you gave me the number, I'll buy 1, I'll buy 0, I'll buy 5, whatever. That's individual. So your individual demand is how much you're willing to buy of any one good or service at the price at which it's being sold, okay? And then to get the market demand, what I would do is then take each one of your individual demands and sum them up. And I would say the market demand for Mr. Washer or Mr. Sketch washable markers is X amount. Okay, does that make sense? So it's basically aggregating from the individual level to the market level. Yeah? Is that a question? No, you're good. Okay. Okay. Does anyone know what the law of demand says? Yeah?
The higher the demand, I'm confused.
What's your name?
Just you.
Padu. Okay. You sound vendor.
Yeah.
Okay. The what? Okay. Yeah. Fire away.
No, I'm saying just for you, like it wasn't me, but now
The lower the price, the higher the demand. Okay. That's basically what it is. Okay, so ceteris paribus, all things being equal, price and quantity demanded are inversely related to each other. Okay, so the higher the price, the lower the demand, the lower the price. The higher the price, the lower the demand, the lower the price, the higher the demand. Okay, does it make sense? Does that feel natural to you? Like it feels like you're comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yeah, ceteris paribus just means
No, all things equal, sorry. Ceteris paribus just means all things equal. So if we only change the price and all the other factors remain the same, you would buy more things if they were cheaper, and you would buy less things if they were more expensive. That feels like a naturally correct law, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Huh? So as a result, that's what we find the graph, the demand graph looks like, right? So as the price goes up, the demand comes down. As the price comes down, the demand goes up. Does that make sense? See that? Okay. Everybody cool with that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, the determinants of demand. So what are the things that impact how much demand there will be for any one thing? The product price itself, obviously. Like we said, the higher the price, the lower the demand is going to be. Okay, but the product price generally leads to a movement along the graph. Okay, and I'll differentiate it now. But what it does is this. Okay, so when the price changes, you have a movement on the graph itself. Okay, whereas all the other factors tend to cause the demand graph to shift outward or inward. So the whole graph just shifts. So at the same price, you ask for more or you ask for less. Okay, makes sense. I'll draw it now so it's clear. But okay, so product price is one. Household income is the second one. So when you have more money, you just make it rain more. Okay, it's that simple. Makes sense. So what happens is that P, Q, okay, at income level X1, that's your demand curve. So let's say at 5 Rand, you would have bought 10 things. Okay, when your income level increases to X2, your demand graph tends to shift out, okay, over there, such that at 5 Rand, you now ask for 15 of the same things. Does that make sense? But if your income was to go down to X0, okay, what you find is that your demand graph shifts out, such that at 5 Rand, you now only ask for 5 things. Okay, is that comfortable? So there's a positive relationship between income, household income, and demand. Everybody cool? Cool. Consumer taste and preferences. Excuse me, same relationship is also positive, except a lot more difficult to measure, right? So, but if consumer preference for that particular good increases, demand goes up, and if it goes down, it comes down. Okay. How do you measure those things? Yeah, you know, tough.
So you're saying the only one that shifts the graph is income?
No. I'm saying the only one that doesn't shift the graph is price. Price.
Oh, okay,
So price creates a movement along the graph.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
up and
Everything
down.
else it shifts.
Everything else shifts the graph. Okay. Okay, cool. So, yeah, okay, so that's consumer taste and preferences, and then changes in prices of related goods. Okay, so what are related goods before we deal with the thing itself? Related goods are things that are either in competition with the good that you're consuming or work with the thing that you're selling. Okay, so an easy example is the left shoe, right shoe. Okay, those are complements, okay, complementary goods, right? So you generally don't want to wear a left shoe without your right shoe. Okay, so if the price of left shoes was to increase, your demand for right shoes would decrease because they work together. Okay, so maybe that's a bad example because it's not clear. Okay, let's go with coffee, tea, and sugar. Okay, people, cars and petrols. It's a good one, but let me try with the tea and sugar. It's a very good one. It's a very good example. So because when you drink tea, generally you add sugar. If the price of sugar was to go up, it would mean that you buy less sugar, right? And if you're buying less sugar, it means that you will have less tea. So the price of sugar went up and your demand for tea went down. Okay, but if the price of sugar went down, you would buy more sugar and therefore consume more tea. Does that make sense? That's how complementary goods work. Okay, so if they have to be consumed together, an increase in the price of the one leads to a decrease in the demand for the other. And if a decrease in the price of the one leads to an increase in the demand for the other. No, doesn't make sense.
Yes, it does.
Does. We're good. Okay, that's complementary goods. Substitute goods, Coke and Pepsi. I mean, I don't consume either, but I assume you could either have Coke or Pepsi. Fair, okay. So if the price of Pepsi went up, you just have more Coke because they're in competition with one another. Does that make sense? And if the price of Pepsi went down, you'd have less Coke and have more Pepsi. Yeah.
Just to make another distinction between substitutes, you're just asking.
Yeah.
Between substitute goods and complements. Just the what's happening between airtime and data now.
Sure.
Would that then be? Would that be? Are they substitutes?
Are they not interchangeable?
And they could be interchangeable, so you can turn the one into the other.
Yeah.
But like because people are communicating differently now, and,
Yeah.
and telecommunication companies are no longer making most of their money from
Sure, airtime, calling.
yes anymore.
I have never thought about that, to be honest. I don't quite have that problem in my sites, so I've never actually thought about it. I'm not being funny, I just haven't thought about it. And I don't know as a result how it works, to be honest, and that's what's happening. So I don't have an answer for you because I just don't know how it works. I have to think about it. I'll try and think about it and have an answer for you tomorrow. I don't know. So I don't know. I thought airtime and data could be.
I think what she's trying to say is when you're converting airtime to data, you can chat more instead of you phoning someone and your airtime finishing quicker.
Got it.
Mean that you have to now buy more airtime.
So they actually substitute one another.
That's what I don't know.
Or are they compliments? That's what that was my question.
Are they compliments?
A compliment for me, I would assume like on sales, you would be if you recharge with 10, then you get 10 free minutes as a compliment, and then you get also data as a compliment, and then
No. So compliments are literally the phone and the airtime.
Oh,
Okay.
So the phone needs the airtime to function,
Okay.
and they move together. That's why I'm saying the data airtime thing
okay.
is not clear for me.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's it's almost a substitute. It sounds like data is a substitute for airtime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like using the same, you should think like invest your resource or you have money.
Yeah.
So you can either use that money to
Yeah.
buy the data.
Oh, that's right. And you're meeting the same basic need, which is communication.
Yeah.
So that's why I think they are substitutes more than they are complements. Okay. Everyone cool? Okay, so that's how changes in related goods works. If it's substitutes, they have an inverse relationship, and if it's I lie. If it's substitutes, price increases of the one leads to, yeah. If it's substitutes, they have a that's terrible. If it's substitutes, they have a positive relationship, price and the quantity, the demand of the good that you're looking at. And if it's a complement, they have an inverse relationship.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Cool. Expectations of future prices. Okay. What would you do if I told you today that the price of the price of airtime is going to decrease tomorrow? What would you do? It's a petrol one. So what do people do when they find out that the price of petrol is going to go up tomorrow? They go and fill up. So the night before a price increase, every petrol station runs out of petrol. Okay. And it's interesting from a petrol station owner's perspective because you don't want to sell that petrol until afterwards, right? So they're like, no. Whereas everybody else is actually coming to buy it. Okay. So if you expect the future price to be higher, you'll consume today. So demand will go up today if the future price is expected to go up. But if the future price is expected to go down, people drive their cars to the brink of empty and rather go park it at the garage and wait until 12:01. Okay. So if the price is expected to go down, your consumption or demand for a good today will decrease. We're good? Awesome. And then the number of consumers, obviously the more consumers, the higher the demand. Okay. Everybody cool? I want us to take a break, but we're just not going to finish if we do, so we're not going to take a break.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Supply. Definition of supply, and this is slightly different from demand, right? Because, yeah. the quantities of goods or services that producers plan to sell at each possible price during a certain period. Okay, so this is not, it takes away the willingness and able thing. It's almost assumed, right? That if you can supply at price 1, you'll be able to supply at price 3. The question is, how much will you supply at that price? Okay, so at 5 Rand, I'll sell you 3 of these. At 10 Rand, I want to sell you 20 of them. Okay, so the higher the price, the more I'm willing to sell to you. Just makes sense, right? Intuitive sense, anyway. And then, so it's the same kind of individual supply versus market supply. And it's horizontal summation because supply number 1 is willing to sell this much at this price. Supply number 2 is willing to sell this much at the same price. Number 3, this much at this other price. And then we add the 3 and we have the market supply. Comfortable. It's literally almost a flip of the other side of the demand coin, right? Cool. So the supply curve looks like that. Can you see the dotted lines? Okay, so the higher the price, the higher the supply. Whereas demand was this way. Remember? Okay. Everyone comfortable? So what are the determinants? Arrows, cues, What are the determinants of supply? The price of the good, positive relationship. The higher the price, the higher the supply. Okay? Yeah.
Sorry? I'm lost a bit.
Yeah.
You are saying the higher the supply?
The price.
The price.
The higher the supply. So the more money you're willing to pay me to lecture you, the more times I'll come to and lecture you. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then prices of related goods. Again, so with this one as well, the price causes a movement along the supply curve. Okay, whereas the other determinants cause a shift of the supply curve. Okay, so price, quantity. Okay, so a change in price causes a shift along the supply curve. Okay, so if we move from 5 to 6, all that happens is that I'll be willing to supply you with 10 and then 12 goods. Oh. Also. Okay, so change in price causes a shift, a movement along the supply curve. Okay, that's the price. And remember I said with demand, it was the same thing, right? And then prices of related goods will have an inverse relationship with supply. This used to. Okay, so if the price of Pepsi was to go up, the supply of Coke would increase. It's a positive relationship, sorry, not an inverse relationship. So if the price of Pepsi would go up, because people would shift their consumption of Pepsi to Coke, the supply of Coke would increase. Okay. No, so demand, in a sense, yeah. So because the demand increases, the supply must meet the demand. So it has a very similar relationship, yeah. And then conditions of production is basically can you produce more goods at the same time, in the same time span, with the same effort, right? So if you increase your agricultural technology, or if you improve your agricultural technology, you're able to make more food in the same harvest period. Okay, so but at the same time, if you have a war and all your machinery is bombed, you produce less. Okay, makes sense. Cool. And then
so the more you produce, the more you can sell it at a lower price.
No, even if it's at the same price.
Yes.
What we assume is that at At the same cost
Yes.
of producing the thing, you can produce more things because you've improved your technology.
Okay.
Okay, so it was costing me R5 to produce this thing, and I could only make 5 of them. And at the same price of R5, I can now make 10 of them because I've added a technological advantage, and so my supply increases. Yeah. Okay. Expectations is that petrol thing. Petrol stations tend to not want to sell if the price is going to go up tomorrow. Okay. So if they expect that the price will go up tomorrow, they will want to hold back their stock.
I'm sure they lie about
Yeah,
that.
they do.
They lie.
I will not comment on that. I can't comment on that. I don't know.
I know they lie.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the price of inputs is ultimately the cost of production, right? So if I have to pay you higher salaries to produce the same thing, I will probably produce less things because it costs me more. Yeah? Makes sense. And if my rent goes up, same story. I get into the same. And then the number of suppliers, the more suppliers there are, and this is the great thing where competition comes in, the more suppliers there are in the space, the more supply there will be in the market. And then government policies and regulations. So an interesting one, for example, around that limits the number of suppliers is licensing, right? So you need a license to be a cell phone provider. What's the telecoms company? To be a Vodacom or a Cell C. Okay, and because they get to decide how many licenses they issue, the number of people providing that service is limited. Yeah? It's one example. I'm trying to think of one on the other side, I can't remember. Gambling. Yeah, it's also licensing. So I'm trying to think about something that increases supply as opposed to take away supply. Subsidies, that's a good one, very good. Yeah.
You have government policies as a determinant of demand as well.
It can be, it's just not a major, yeah, it's just not a major one, yeah, but it definitely can be. So if government decides that they're subsidizing savings, like the tax-free savings account that they've just opened, people in theory will save more because they expect that the returns on